Thank you, George. Hello and welcome, and Victoria too. Just a couple of words about these two. It's with great pleasure that I am able to introduce them. They are actually also in the assessment services team for Cambridge Assessment English, and they are based in Spain. Many of you might actually have seen them before, because actually they are stars of the global webinar program for Cambridge Assessment English, and you will may have seen them speaking on many occasions. And of course, if you've missed any of the recordings, you will be able to watch those on the Cambridge English TV
There will
channel.
be a YouTube playlist so that you can find all the registrations for these webinars.
Absolutely. And in the email that you will be receiving, you'll get information about where to access the ones from the conference. And if you want to watch any more webinars from George, delivered by George and Victoria, you'll be able to see those on the Cambridge English TV as well. So both of them have extensive teaching and teacher training experience, as you can tell from the webinars. And it is with great pleasure that we introduce the right criteria session. So over to you two.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you again to the Italian team for having us. It's a pleasure to be taking part in the what's it called? The Cambridge Online Experience. Yeah, well done. Thanks, Vicky. My name's George. Sarah has done a very good job of introducing us. And I work with Victoria in the Assessment Services Department in the Madrid office. So what are we going to look at today, Victoria?
We're going to be looking at the right criteria. I'm going to share screen. Please bear with me. Can you see it?
Yep.
Great.
Excellent. So the right criteria, what do we mean by the right criteria, Victoria?
Well, we're going to look at how we can use assessment criteria to improve our students' performance, and also to design tasks that elicit the right performance.
Well, exactly. Elicit everything that we want to hopefully elicit from our students, so that we can then assess it, fairly and accurately, hopefully. So we'd like to start off with a little poll. We always get mixed feelings with this. Could we start that poll, please, Sarah? So do you think we write more or less today than we did in 1998?
Okay, I'm going to have to ask my colleagues to launch the poll, because I don't have access to the poll. So someone else in the team, could you kindly launch the poll, please?
We've got a lot of people just going for it in the chat box.
Yes, no.
Let's definitely.
There they've got the poll.
Let's see if you could have a go at that poll, just so we get a vague idea of the split in opinion. Is that happening? I'm not sure.
Yes,
I can see the
we
screen.
have
Okay.
64%.
Okay, excellent.
Saying less.
Oh.
Mm. Yes, 62% less and 38% more.
It's always nice to have a bit of disagreement in the chat box, I think. So what do you think, Victoria? Do we write more or less today than we did in 1998?
It is different. The type of writing that we do nowadays is different. But we write less.
I think volume-wise, I would definitely say volume-wise, I think we write a lot more today than we did in 1998. But as Victoria said, the way that we write is very different. I changed phones a while ago and downloaded a WhatsApp conversation that I think it had been about 6 months worth of WhatsApp conversation with a friend, and we sent each other 25,000 messages in 6 months, which is mad. So I do think that we write a lot more. We're doing it very differently. We're doing it on devices. I think a much broader section of society is writing than perhaps they did in 1998. And all of our students, I think, are probably writing a lot more than perhaps they did back then. Interesting. Well, we had a little bit of division there. Shall we move on to the Mentimeter, Victoria?
Yeah.
Is that the next? Yeah, perfect. Right. if you could go to this Mentimeter or Mentimeter, you can either use that QR code or go to the link. I'll try and pop the link in the chat box, Victoria, and I'll share screen with the. You have to stop sharing. Sorry, Victoria. So let me share.
Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. Can you see that?
I can.
Yeah. Right. So if we could go along to that Mentimeter, I'll just pop the link in the chat box. We'd like you to write what do you think characterizes good writing?
Accuracy.
Nice. There's the link in the chat box if you haven't been able to access it. Oh, very nice. This is the first time we've ever done this. We've done this talk a few times, but we've never done a Mentimeter with this. It's always very interesting. Well structured, organized.
Range, variety.
Very nice. Coherence.
Relevance.
Punctuation.
Cohesion.
Sorry, I think I sent the link to all the panelists. There you go. There it is again. Let's give you a little bit longer to see what you come up with.
Clear.
Vocabulary, correctness, catchy, range of adjectives, simple. Okay, excellent. Right, back to the presentation, Victoria. I think most of these have popped up.
George.
I will start. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Can you see?
Not yet.
Let me see. I'm going to share again.
There you go. That's on route. So we had a nice variety of things, and it continues to grow, the word cloud. There you go, Victoria. Perfect. Some people did mention correct spelling. We talked about accuracy, relevance, correct punctuation. I think that popped up. And nobody, yeah, we did mention grammar. Good.
Yeah.
Correct grammar and correct clear punctuation. This is quite a traditional view of, good writing. I think at lower levels, we really do focus on this. Perhaps we focus a little bit too much on spelling, grammar, punctuation at higher levels, when I think there are lots of other criteria to be taken into account. So for our purposes as teachers or as assessors, what exactly do we mean by writing, Victoria?
Well, here we are going to look at a view expressed in 1991 by an expert. Okay, so here we are going to see this perspective of what we mean by writing. So a piece of continuous written text of 100 words or more. However, we need to take into account whether this is suitable or not for our students, because maybe if we have A2 students, asking them to write 100 words is a bit too much. So we always have to take into account who our target reader is, or target reader or target candidate rather. Then also the amount of freedom that we give our students to create a response. Here a keyword is substantial. If we are going to assess the performance, then maybe we want to give only limited freedom, some freedom, so that we can measure all the performance against a common yardstick. And then the last aspect mentioned by Leon is that the performance is assessed by human raters. And that obviously there needs to be training involved so that we can have confidence that the results are reliable, that everyone has been measured again the same yardstick.
And we would hope that we can reflect that as far as possible as teachers within the classroom with homework, etc. And so, yeah, as teachers, or from a testing point of view, we are interested in sampling from a specific domain of writing. So we've got to make very clear what that domain is. As we were saying before, we've got to have the structure there to elicit the kind of language that we want to be eliciting from our students to assess or to help them improve. So if we go back, does anybody know in the chat box, does anybody know what year we had our first exam? Any ideas in the chat box? The year of the first ever Cambridge English exam? Oh, any good? Anybody close? Oh, 1918, we're getting close. Quite a big variety. 1912 is the closest so far. It was 1913. It was proficiency. We had 3 candidates, I think. They were tested for 11.5 hours and everybody failed. Not very useful. We have come, quite a way since then, I think, but this was taken from the writing paper. What is problematic with this paper, with these questions? What are the problems with these questions? Victoria?
Sorry, I apologize. I thought it was.
No, it's all right. No, I was waiting. Oh, no word count. Nice. Specific knowledge, the context. Exactly. These are all very content and knowledge based. Obviously, it depends what criteria we're using, but are we focusing entirely on language or no? It's depending a lot on other areas. So if we fast forward to now.
Yeah.
The Cambridge English model of writing, Victoria, do you want to talk us through this?
Yes, it starts with the message. So this is the piece of writing that our students should produce at the end. And of course, everything starts with the cognitive aspect. That is the ideas that come up, that we need to come up with for that specific task. So the content that our students will need to produce.
And then to try and transform those ideas into a message, we consider the linguistic angle. So obviously what language they'll be using, how they use that language to do so. And the third element, Victoria?
Yeah, the third element has to do with the who we are writing to, why we are writing. So the target reader, the purpose, all these factors are going to have an impact on our choice of words and the message that we produce in the end.
Exactly, and all of these feed into the message, but there's also constant interplay between all of these. So if we try and break writing into these constituent parts, we've got to think about criteria that fits these. So fast forward to, is this first for schools, Victoria? Potentially? Yes. It should be familiar. Is it first? Yeah, I think it is. So do you want to talk us through
Yeah, all
the constituent parts of this task, Victoria?
Yeah, all the aspects that we mentioned in the Cambridge English model of writing are reflected here in the task. So we start, for example, with the topic. So what do you think I should do? In this case is a recommendation. The context. So my grandmother has given me some money. The purpose, our reason for writing. So should I buy a camera? Should I go on holiday with my friends? My parents want me to save money. Also our target reader. So in this case, an English friend. This is going to have an influence on the type of language that we use. And the text type. So in this case, we want to write a letter, or we have to write a letter.
And the last clue, which popped up several times in the chat box, yes, the word count. Just very quickly here, there are a lot of sort of myths that go around about our exams and our word counts. The word counts that we provide are there as a guide. Okay, they are based on, you know, experience of millions and millions of candidates doing these tasks successfully at level. But if candidates write fewer than the prescribed word count, they're not going to, you know, lose marks. They're not going to be penalized. Our criteria doesn't work like that anyway. If they go too far over, likewise, there are lots of people who say, oh, you can go 10% over, and then the examiners draw a line and don't mark anything else. That is a complete myth.
Mm-hmm.
So the last thing we want in an exam situation is students sitting there counting words, crossing words out, trying to write more words. It's a complete waste of time. So again, it's a guidance. Okay, and yes, you are all right. It was B1, just checking. There's no limit, Michelle. This is exactly what I'm saying. There is no limit. The examiners will, they read and take into account everything that is written, but, you know, considerably fewer. It's very unlikely that they will produce enough language to satisfy all of the criteria. And
not address all the content points either. So.
Exactly. And if they go too far over, you know, they're increasing the chance of, you know, making more mistakes, repetition, unnecessary information, etc. So they are a guide. Obviously, get your students to practice writing around these word counts. But they are there for a guide. And yes, well done, everybody. It is old B1 preliminary, I think, pre-revision preliminary. So thank you for correcting me.
Paying attention, George.
Exactly. I was just checking if everyone was paying attention. So if we have a look at another one,
yeah.
Can we try and identify these? So quickly in the chat box, topic, what is the topic here? Yeah, I suppose clothes. What did we put, Victoria?
Okay.
Yeah, the teenage clothes shop. Lovely. The context. What do you think the context is, Victoria? Yeah, teen magazine, lovely. Advert and international fashion magazine. Our writing tasks are always contextualized like this. What's the next one? Purpose, perhaps? Purpose, we've mentioned this previously in the chat box. Yes, include information about what the shop looks like, the kind of clothes it sells, and would you recommend the shop? Lovely. Text type, target reader, even.
Target reader. So who are we writing to?
I think this popped up in the chat box as well. Again, teenagers, where you live. Text type, quite clearly a review. That was mentioned in the chat box as well. And lastly, what's missing?
The count.
The word count, 140 to 190 words. So getting your students used to instinctively picking all of these out, especially when they're planning, I think is really useful in the exam situation. I would always tell my students to spend sort of 5 to 10% of their given time planning and reviewing. Is that what you used to work with, Victoria?
Yeah, I think it is something that students maybe don't think of or prefer to start writing straight away, but this planning and reviewing at the end really helps them to include all the content points, to sort out little mistakes that they have made. So this is a really very valuable time that they can do.
Definitely. And also, again, in an exam situation, if they suddenly have a mind blank halfway through, at least they've got their plan. So yeah, please encourage the students to do it. So frequently you do, as Victoria said, just see them tearing away straight away from the beginning of the time allotted to them. So we've looked at the sort of what we need from a writing task for our purposes, teaching and improving or assessing. I look at the Cambridge English model. So can you all, I'm sure all of you can, tell us what the 4 criteria that we use for writing are?
I think here it will be a matter of who is faster at writing. So
Who types most quickly?
yeah, exactly.
So we've got a C, it's not for Cambridge. Organization, language. Ooh, nearly. Content, thank you, Camilla. And the CA, Communicative Achievement, beautiful, thank you. Are we going to talk through these, Victoria?
Yeah. Okay, so content here obviously is the information that our students need to include or cover. So maybe we have some bullet points in the content points are bullet points. Other times we can see, as in the previous examples, yes, questions in the inputs in the rubric. That is
yeah. Higher levels, you have quite a variety of different input to synthesize. There should really be no excuse for not scoring full marks on content. It's such a shame when you see a beautiful piece of writing, they've missed one of the content points and they're just instantly not doing as well as they could have. And these are all equally weighted. So that is 25% of your mark pinned down already with the content. As I said, I really think there's no excuse for students not to get full marks on content. I think what's interesting to bear in mind with this criteria, I mean, a lot of the things that we came up with in our word cloud were very language based. And yes, obviously language is one of the criteria, but it is only one of the 4 criteria, which I think is very important, especially to highlight to, perhaps students have problems with spelling. Students whose grammar isn't, 100%, they can still do very well in the writing if they bear the other criteria in mind.
I think that maybe some students, when they go from more basic levels to higher levels, maybe they struggle a bit with developing their ideas enough. Sometimes they do cover, like they mention the different content points, but it is a problem of developing the ideas enough to give examples, maybe explaining them a bit, and this is something that is difficult for them.
Yeah, definitely. So organization, again, we'll look at organization in a bit of detail hereafter, but there's a lot more to organization than just paragraphs. And sometimes too many paragraphs or paragraphs in the wrong places can negatively impact the quality of a piece of writing, I think.
Also linking words. Maybe sometimes we see students who have written a lot of linking words, but they do.
Yeah, especially a B2 first.
Really makes sense.
You get a linking word in like every sentence. So again, it's using them appropriately and naturally, I think. Communicative achievement, what do we mean by this, Victoria?
Yeah, this usually has like two parts. One of them is like our ideas, whether they are complex enough at a certain level, and also it has the part of layout and the text type. So does the text read as an essay or an article? Is it obvious the text type it is?
Exactly. Register, etc., would also sort of overlap between language and communicative achievement. Language, fairly obvious. I think, are they using appropriate language to their level? So, Victoria, do you have a link to pop in the chat box?
I think, well, yes, I do, but it is also in the QR code. But if you want, I can try and open the chat box. Bear with me a second.
If you can use the QR code, we'd like you to download that B1 preliminary criteria, please. We're going to do a little bit of assessing. Thank you, Victoria. So should we go back to the question?
Yeah.
So this is from the sample paper, the post-revision B1 preliminary. You see this announcement in your school English language magazine. What makes you laugh? Write an article telling us what you find funny, who you enjoy laughing with, do you think it's good to laugh a lot, and why. Best articles will be published next month. Write your article. So we're going to look at 2 sample papers here, and we would like you using that criteria to focus on, should we go for just 1 criterion, Victoria, or 2? Okay, no, let's go for 1. On to the next slide, Victoria. There you go, the QR code's back up, Lara, sorry, but if not, you can download it from that link. So I'd like you to look at this now and give this candidate a mark for organization and 1 for language. Okay, remember this is B1, we're thinking also. Using that criteria, give them a mark for organization and for language, and pop it in the chat box. So an, O number, L number.
Yeah,
remember that.
So, sorry, George, the handout also includes the question, so the task, in case you need to refer back to it.
Perfect. Remember the way our criteria works, you can see the 5 different bands. A band 3, if we're looking at B1 criteria, band 3 is B1. Okay, a band 5 is B2. And all of our writing criteria, as with our speaking criteria, works like this. So it all overlaps. We recognize that B1 is not an island. All of our criteria overlap like this. So first one, Michaela said organization 4 and language 3. Interesting. Anyone else? Band 3 from Rita for both of them? Just give you another 30 seconds, should I say? 3 and 3, 2 and 3. Ooh, 5 for organization, 3 for language. 2 and 2, 3 and 3. Okay, we're all pretty much on the money, I think. 4 and 3, 1 and 3. This is pretty solid B1, I would say, language-wise. I think it's a step above A2. 3 and 1. God, there's some very strict teachers here. We normally have very strict teachers, don't we, Victoria?
Yes, and also it is true that we are giving them little time.
Exactly, whether we are aware that this is, we have asked you to do this very quickly. Okay, should we have a look at the examiner's comments, Victoria? So yes, a 5 for content. They've gone above and beyond what they're asked to do, so that is a solid 5. The rest are all 3s. So this is B1, remember. So the organization, it is connected, it's coherent. Paragraphs are used to separate the text into sections. And although they're sometimes limited to just 1 sentence, different ideas are expressed in each one. And it provides the structure of the text. Some basic linking words and the occasional cohesive device, like a referencing pronoun, are used to connect the ideas of when, and, with my family and my friend, but I really enjoy, it's for this. Okay, so this is a solid piece of B1 writing, I would say. Do you agree, Victoria?
I do, yeah.
Oh, I was hoping you might disagree. Okay, lovely, moving on. Same question.
Okay.
I love using this one. I'll explain why afterwards. So same question, we would like you to give them a mark for language and for organization. Oh, Maria Luisa, 3 and 3, 2 and 4. Oh, yeah, this is what we were hoping for, wasn't it, Victoria? 2 and 4, 3 and 3. Okay, 4 and 5, 2 and 3. Again, a bit of disagreement going on in the chat box. 4s. Pardon?
You love that, of course.
Oh, well, we always like a little bit of disagreement going on in the chat box. Keeps things interesting. Okay, lovely. I used this. This again is taken from the handbook. I use this because not very long after the revision and the handbook came out, a teacher rang the office in Madrid, and she was furious. Why was she furious, Victoria?
Because she couldn't understand how the candidate could have 5 organization if the text didn't have any paragraphs.
Exactly. So if we move on, this candidate got 5s across the board. Okay, the organization, yes, there are no paragraphs, but it's well organized, it's coherent, variety of linking words, some cohesive devices, particularly to avoid repetition, are used to connect ideas across and within sentences. So that's what I was saying earlier. The organization is a lot more than just paragraphs, especially from sort of B1 upwards. I mean, this got 5s, so this would satisfy B2. Okay, this would be a middle of the road B2 piece of writing. Obviously, it's answering a question designed to elicit B1. You are stricter, and this is normally what happens, Anna, and it's great. You keep being strict, and your students will all do wonderfully in the writing exam. But all of these, there are so many sample papers with detailed, yes, you all are, Nadia, with detailed examiner comments for all of our qualifications in the teacher's handbook, which I think is probably the most useful thing in the whole teacher's handbook. And it's really good to use these with your students. Use sample texts rather than model text. What's the difference between sample and model, Victoria?
Well, a model text is a text that ideally doesn't have any mistakes. Okay, so something that students can use for reference. But then a sample text is a sample text. Sorry, is a text written at the level of at the candidate's level. So it has some mistakes, so it can be used for this type of corrections, so that students can identify where the problems are and improve the text.
And I also think it's a very useful exercise getting students to engage with samples and to mark them themselves. I mean, our writing criteria probably wouldn't be appropriate for lower levels, but Victoria?
Yeah, you can always write them down to level, adapt them. Actually, we have done it, and we call them success criteria. And what we have done is just make the assessment criteria, which are targeted or suitable for teachers and examiners. We have adapted them to make them easy to understand for our students at different levels.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to get students engaging with each other's writing, and hopefully it will have the knock-on effect of getting them engaging a lot more intimately with themselves, and help them really identify their strengths and their weaknesses, areas they can improve.
I think it is a very useful tool to improve learning, because familiarizing students with the assessment criteria helps them to understand what is expected of them, where they are, and where they need to get, so to speak. So in this sense, it is an important learning tool. Definitely. But it is true that they need careful planning and support, and it needs to be well structured to make them work.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so moving on, Victoria, so we lower level writing, so let's say sort of up to B1. I think B1 is where things really begin to change, and from B1 onwards. And the lower level, there's always, a much more focus on, the control of language, the accuracy, probably much more limited freedom if you think about the key for schools task types, or the preliminary task types as well, really. And so it's much more sort of knowledge telling. Whereas once we start moving up beyond B1, I think there's tends to be more of a focus on organization, on register, so thinking about things like communicative achievement, increased freedom, obviously not complete freedom, when we get back from the holidays, and so, write about your holidays. What is wrong with that, Victoria? or problematic with that?
The problem with that is that if we give our students too much freedom, and then the answers can be very different. So it is difficult to assess them. It is easier from an assessment point of view to give them some structure, some guidance in terms of the type of performance that we are expected, so that we find the type of writing that we want.
Exactly. So again, yep, some sort of from B2 upwards, it's more sort of knowledge transforming, I would say.
Yeah.
Moving on with, oh, sorry, Victoria, sorry.
The problem is what you were mentioning before, the complex ideas that students are okay with knowledge telling, but is this change from knowledge telling to knowledge transforming, especially when we have younger and younger candidates sitting maybe higher levels, that they need extra support from us to be able to do it.
Yeah, and we see a lot in Spain, I imagine Italy as well. You're probably getting younger and younger candidates taking B2 first to C1 especially, and their language is very strong. You know, they would be doing very well in their use of English, and they have the language, but it's once you get into the communicative achievement and organization kind of area that they tend to not do as well. The younger candidates, a lot of that is just a question of maturity, I think. Don't you, Victoria? Should we have a look at communicative achievement? Okay. So this is the criteria for B2 first. So as we said before, a 3 is a B2. A 5 is moving up into C1 here. And Victoria was talking earlier about this two sort of halves of communicative achievement. So it's using the conventions of the task successfully. Is it written like a letter? Is it written like an essay? Does it read like an article? So using the conventions to hold the target reader's attention. And it's this idea of communicating ideas. And the middle of B1, it's using conventions to hold the target reader's attention and communicate straightforward ideas pretty successfully. It's not that we're not stretching them too much, hopefully at B2, but moving up into C1, this is where things tend to get a little more complicated, I think, is yes, using conventions effectively to hold the target reader's attention and communicate straightforward and complex ideas as appropriate. And this is where sometimes some of our younger students fall down. They will express, you know, essentially what is a fairly simple idea in very complex language, but the idea itself remains fairly simple. We'll have a look at this in context. So we bear this in mind. Do we have the B2 criteria as well, Victoria?
Yeah, it's in handouts number 2. So
okay, perfect.
Is for you to download that. If you have.
So communicative achievement and a quick look at language. Do you want to talk us through this, Victoria, quickly?
Yeah, here we see again that 3 is B2, and we can see 2 aspects here. One, the range, the variety of vocabulary and grammatical forms, and then also the aspect of the errors, that there may be errors, but they do not impede communication. So here is variety and accuracy. Those 2 aspects are the ones that need to be taken into account at B2. And then when we move to C1, we see that students are expected to use less common lexes, but still in an appropriate way, and more flexibility with more control. And students they can make mistakes. There are occasional errors, but they do not impede communication.
Excellent. Angela's asking, how can she get handout number 2? Was it the same link?
It's not. If they use the QR code, I can. If you give me a minute, I will.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. It should be. I mean, I hope I did it right, but yeah, it should. Okay, this should be giving them access to handout number 2, but also with the QR code.
Perfect.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. So using this B2 first, we're going to do what you shouldn't do, because the criteria is always applied. to the text as a whole, but just to sort of exemplify what we've just been talking about, I'd like you to have a look at these two sentences. And we'd like you to think about language and communicative achievement. So teenagers are too young to teach other people about anything. So what would we give A for language?
I'm sorry, George, just to maybe that's where the confusion is. The assessment criteria for B2 is at the end of the document. Okay, so they will see the examiner comments for the B2 tasks, but
okay.
On the third page is where they will find the assessment criteria for B2.
Thank you. So what would we give this top paragraph for language if we're using B2 criteria? Sylvia says 4, Rosemary 5. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty strong. I say maybe a 4, maybe a 5. Mm-hmm. There's one sort of awkwardness in it, but apart from that, you know, they're very nicely written sentences, several clauses, nice internal referencing, etc. So yeah, this is strong from a language point of view. And B, what would we give B for language? I love this sentence. Obviously that cleaning manufacturing water helps to avoid extinction of ocean residents. A 1 or a 2. Yeah, I'd say probably maybe a 2, because I mean it's the Lexis is above B1, I would say. They haven't quite managed to express themselves very clearly. Okay, and communicative achievement, it's not really fair to give this a mark because it's only sort of 2 sentences and 1 sentence, but communicative achievement here, Victoria, why have we used these examples?
Just to reflect on the ideas, whether they are complex, whether they are simple, and to see how the difference between a simple idea expressed in a very complicated way, linguistic-wise, language-wise, but and a very more complex idea expressed in more simple,
slightly awkwardly. I mean, it's not simply, it's just not very successfully, I would say. So yeah, this is an example of what we were saying. This top candidate probably wouldn't do that well on communicative achievement. I mean, we'd have to see the whole text. I mean, it's probably written quite nicely as an essay, but this is not a very complex idea at all. All they're essentially doing is agreeing with the statement, whereas candidate B is trying to express quite a complex idea. A lot of thought has gone into that. The language is the barrier here. So we just wanted to show, I think this is an essay, Michela. So again, as I said, it's unfair to use criteria just on such a small amount of text, but we just wanted to show that to try and exemplify what we're saying. We get a lot of, well, we are getting more and more, especially in Spain, a lot of young candidates who are writing, you know, very, very nicely. Very, very complex. Well, the language that they use is very complex in their writing, but the ideas that they're expressing often aren't quite as
the ideas
aren't quite as complex.
They should be at this level. Mm-hmm.
Which fine for B2. I mean, as we saw, the band 3. The band 3, which is a B2, is about communicating straightforward ideas. Okay, but it's getting that step up, a higher B2, moving towards the C1 is this expression of more complex ideas. So, Victoria, feedback.
Yeah, we have talked about the importance of feedback for with the success criteria and the assessment criteria as well from the point of view of the teacher. But here we are going to tell you about Write and Improve, which is I think it is a great learning tool for your students, something that you can use in class, but that your students can also use in their own time if they want to practice writing a bit more.
Yeah, we're going to talk to you about this for the next 10 minutes or so. Just quickly, a few things in the chat box just before we move on to Write and Improve. And Michele, yes, contractions shouldn't be used in an essay, but if a candidate used a couple of contractions and maybe if they did it consistently, they're not, I mean, I don't think it would have a huge impact at B2 on their mark. Again, we don't, all of our criteria is designed to be used positively. It is designed to recognize what students can do rather than highlighting, you know, what they can't do. We don't count mistakes and we don't penalize candidates. You know, in a perhaps a more traditional sense. It's all positively marked.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Victoria?
Yeah, precisely that everything is we give them credit for what they can do, what they can show.
Sylvia, can you write in the first person in an essay? I mean, I've seen essays that do. I think at B2, I don't think there's any problem, you know, offering your own view. That's a bit of a step up to sort of C1 to really start using much more objective language and externalizing opinions using the passive and things like that. I would expect that much more at C1. So I don't think it would be a huge problem at B2. Do you agree, Victoria?
Yeah.
I've just gone against everything I should say. Yeah, again, for B2, I think that's fine. So on to Write and Improve. What is really important to remember about Write and Improve is that it's not a spell checker. It's not Grammarly. It was trained using millions and millions of exam scripts real exam scripts from candidates taking our exams. So they were all marked, you know, by humans and annotated, and that was fed into the system. So it knows what is typical of an A2 student, a B1 student, a B2 student. Obviously the grammar and vocabulary, etc. It's very, you know, it's very strong and very reliable in terms of spelling, grammar, vocab. But it has this, it's this sense that it knows what students are expected to be able to produce at each level is what really makes it interesting and different, I think. So you go along to Write and Improve, log in, and Victoria?
Yeah, we're going to say that it is a good idea for your students to register. It is free, but if they do it, they will be able to see the different tasks that they have been producing. So they will see their evolution. So that's why we always recommend that they register and then that every time they log in so that they can see their progress. As you can see, there are different workbooks for different levels, so beginner, intermediate, and advanced. The system recommends some tasks for the different levels, but you can also create your own task for your students. So
we create a workbook and send them a code, and then they can answer whatever questions you would like to set them. Francesca, Speak and Improve does exist, but it is very much still in its early stages. It's still a research project. Okay, it needs a lot. It needs a lot of data to get up to the consistency and the reliability as Write and Improve. If you have any candidates preparing for LinguaSkill, right, Speak and Improve is a really nice way for them to practice how the speaking test in LinguaSkill feels, speaking to a computer. The task types are exactly the same. It does give a CFR level at the end, but unofficially, I wouldn't trust it at the moment. And I have heard there is Read and Improve. Do we have shall I try and find the link to Read and Improve? Joy, can you talk us through Read and Improve quickly?
Yeah, Read and Improve. I think it is linked actually to Write and Improve. So it kind of suggests texts for your level, but basically what you can see is a list of texts with the level they are suitable for. And then you can read it. The good thing is that you can hover over words and it will give you the dictionary definition, but also information about collocations. So it is it is very useful from that point of view. And also it gives students the opportunity to write a summary of the text.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing about it, about Read and Improve. As Victoria said, it's really cool. It scans the internet for authentic texts. I'll just pop the link in here, and it gives an idea of what level each text is, or well, its idea of the sort of level of each text. But one of the really cool things is the summarizing tool, which uses very similar technology to Write and Improve in terms of the language that you use, but a different technology to see how well you have summarized the main points of an article. It's a really good thing to, especially, well, I think, well, probably at all levels, but from B2 onwards, I think summarizing is a very useful activity. I think it really practices or helps practice the higher order thinking skills, and I think it can be very effective for students. It doesn't take very long. They make it quite routine, but yeah, Read and Improve, you can do that there. Okay. So back to Write and Improve. We have taken one of the beginner tasks. This should look familiar to you all. I think this looks like old school A2 key for schools, and we had a go at it. So you want to put the right paragraph describing your home, include information about how many rooms there are, what the kitchen and living room are like, and whether there is a garden. So I put on my A1 Spanish learner's hat and I wrote this. This might be familiar to some of you. So on the platform, you pop your answer into the text box there where it says start again. You click a button, and in about 3 or 4 seconds, you get instant feedback. This was, as I'm sure you all imagined, a pretty solid A1 piece of writing. This is what happens on the feedback screen. Do you want to talk us through this, Victoria?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it offers feedback in terms of content. So you can see here that George managed to answer all the questions, and then it also gives feedbacks at word, phrase, and sentence level. Some of the feedback is quite straightforward. Apologies. So, for example, for friend or hello, there is an exclamation mark, and if you look at that, it will say, "Oh, did you mean hello with double L?" But some of the other feedback with the question mark and the star, then is saying, "Here there is a problem. There is something that is not working."
Yeah, or this word doesn't look right to us.
Exactly, and it's the student's responsibility to work out where the problem is and try to improve it, correct it, and then submit a second draft.
Exactly, and that's another thing that I think is really, really great about this resource, that it doesn't say, this is wrong, here's the answer. It directs them towards where the problems are, and it's putting that responsibility in the students' hands to improve their own writing themselves. And the instantaneous aspect of it, I think, really helps, because, you know, a class of 30 students, you know, it may be the case, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but, you know, you have 30 pieces of writing, students to do the writing, they hand it into the teacher, they get the writing back next week, and in many cases, you know, a lot of our students just care about what mark they're going to get, and then they forget about it forever. So the instantaneous aspect of this, I think, is really good, because it encourages them to revisit and redraft and build on the same piece of writing, which I think is a really useful skill, you know, for their academic careers thereafter as well. So we took that feedback on board, and we tried to improve it a little bit. Does anybody like to have a little, go back, Victoria? Let's go back one. Does anybody like to have a little guess at what level this is? We dealt with some of the issues we had. Strict teachers, aren't they? A2, 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 A2. Ooh, a B1. Ooh, pre-intermediate. Oh, no, we're warming up a little. There's still a bit. There's still some pretty serious problems in here, but you know, it holds together considerably better than the last piece of writing. So went in, made those changes, and Victoria, what did we get? Yes, an A2. Excellent. Here you can see we showed you the feedback screen earlier with all of the different highlighting and the exclamation marks, etc. You also get this changes screen. So students can have a visual representation of the changes that they've made, which I think is really useful, because then they can click, and so they can see how those changes have affected the feedback. It was me, Michaela. It wasn't anyone else. It was me. And yes, I know I wrote many more than 30 words, but I was just doing it to exemplify how write and improve works. Another thing that is interesting about this, do you see that the bar? Yeah, exactly where Victoria's mouse is. This is content to a certain degree. It's getting a lot better at this. I mean, when this first came out 5 or 6 years ago, I was fairly dubious. I'm quite old school, and I was like, no, it can't do this. And I spent quite a lot of time trying to trick it. And I think the first iteration, it was trained on, I think, A2 and B1, and it was not really very successful, anything above B1. And things like content, no. And you could sort of write a letter backwards and it wouldn't figure it out. But now it's pretty strong. So that bar there is more or less a content idea. No, as I said, Michaela, we never penalize students, but if they go considerably over the word count, then the chances are that they'll introduce a lot of unnecessary information, and it opens or increases the possibility of them making errors, but we never penalize. I think if you write fewer than 25 words on A2 key, I don't think you can get full marks in content. I think that is the only example of that, though. In all of our other papers, as I said, writing examiners have to read everything that is written, and they will not be penalized. It's very similar. It works on smartphones, laptops, Padlets. I did a session with about 350 Portuguese graduates, and we got them all to write an email on their phone. It was very exciting. You know, well, it was exciting for me anyway, but it does work. And that's really cool as well. I think, you know, your students can do it on the bus. When did you last write something on Write and Improve, Victoria?
Some months ago, I'm
No? Okay. So we took that. Did we improve it even more, Victoria?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. We've improved it even more. Anybody want a guess at this? We've solved most of the problems there. This is actually a good example, because there are no errors in this. This is a good example, something you do need to bear in mind. Yeah, this is a solid B1. There's nothing wrong in this, but one thing to bear in mind is that it can only assess, it can only evaluate what you give it, okay? So that was that was error-free, but it was all pretty much B1E language. It would be difficult to score sort of C1, C2 unless you write, I would say, at least sort of what, a minimum of 60, 70 words, Victoria, to really show off enough, to really show off enough of your grammar and your vocab for the system to be confident that that you have demonstrated C1. But I did turn the description of my house into a bit of a feeling sorry for myself letter to Maria. But I left something out here, didn't I, Victoria?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is on purpose. This to show that it does mark all the way up to C2. Okay. It can confidently go C2 and even C2 plus. But I left out exactly. I left out the kitchen, I think. Did I? No, which bit did I leave out, Victoria?
No, yeah, I think it was the kitchen.
So I have kitchen. Go back a couple of slides, just out of interest, because it was to prove that the content thing does work.
Yeah.
No, kitchen's there. Kitchen's there. Pardon?
The living room and the sitting.
Yeah. So I talk about the kitchen, talk about the garden. Didn't talk about the living room. And just to show that it does work, I only got 4 out of 5. It could tell that I hadn't spoken about the sitting room. So if we can move on to the next slide, I think.
Yeah.
There, I added in a few sentences about the sitting room, and take it up to a 5. Things like communicative achievement. I mean, I'm not technological. I'm not how do I say this? I'm not
Let's see how you
an incredibly gifted technological linguist, so I don't want to say anything out of place, but from my experience, yeah, thank you, well done, Nadia. From my experience, in terms of language, vocab, grammar, etc., this is incredibly reliable. I don't know how strong it is really at the nuances of organization and communicative achievement, but the big advantage of this is that it takes a huge burden off you as teachers. I think it really gets the students more engaged. As we said before, the instantaneous aspect of it and the sort of gamified aspect of it as well to some degree. But it takes a huge burden off you as teachers. You can put away your red or your green or your purple pens and focus, especially at the high levels, focus on those criteria that we spoke about becoming more important at those high levels. Focus on communicative achievement and organization. You don't have to worry about the language because this will do it for you.
Yeah, I think also, George, that it is very useful because sometimes, our students think that they are writing at a certain level, and that this tool can help them identify why they are writing maybe at a lower level of what they think they are writing. So this is giving them the tools to identify exactly how they can move to the next level. Exactly.
It is. I think it's the best resource that we have by a long way. We've been looking at the everything we've looked at the moment is for free. You can set up workbooks as a teacher for free. There is an additional functionality called Class View, which is a subscription, and that gives you as a teacher full, very detailed visibility of everything that each of your students are doing. But as I said, everything we've looked at today is available for free. Please get your students using it if they're not already. We have had some good feedback in the chat box from teachers who are using it, so that's
and George, can I just add that you can try the Class View for 2 months for free if you did want to experiment.
Oh, can you? Is that still the case? Oh, excellent. Yeah, well, check out Class View because that is amazing. I have a group of post proficiency students at the moment, and it's amazing. I can see how many attempts they have had at each at each piece of writing, what time they did it, how their grades improved or not. It's a great tool. Oh, Angela, could you write etc. in a formal essay? What do you think, Victoria?
You tell me, George.
Well avoided, very well avoided. Again, I don't think a student would be penalized for it. I mean, I use etc. in quite formal writing where appropriate. I mean, I wouldn't discourage your students from doing it, but there are, you know, often other ways to express etc. Where can we find what, Rosanna? Quoting Latin's fine, but remember you've got to do it in italics. So to finish off, I'm sure you've heard about this already if you've been here for all of the last 3 days, but Victoria?
Yeah, your new English classroom is a new section on our website that was launched in September, but it keeps being updating. So So there you can find tips, advice, lesson plans that you can use for your lessons, whether you are teaching face-to-face, online, or in a blended situation. You can also find resources for emotional support, and something that we wanted to point out, because we are talking about writing and assessment of writing, is the guides to assessing writing. They are very useful. They are very recent as well, and they include tips, but also activities that you can do with your students. So please check them out if you haven't done it yet.
Excellent.
And then, of course, we have our section on our website, Teaching English, supporting every teacher, and there lots of resources, sample papers, lesson plans available for you and that you can use with your students. And we will also would like to mention the MOOC, Teaching English Online, that is available for you to register, and the new session is coming up. Is mid-April. There will be a new session.
Excellent. We've got time for a couple of questions in the Q&A, Victoria.
Absolutely. There's one I've seen somebody asked earlier, she asking about using a dictionary while writing.
Not in the exam, but I would strongly encourage use of a dictionary, you know, when studying. What do you think, Sarah?
I think so too. I think it's useful to gain dictionary skills, but of course you do need to practice writing without a dictionary so you don't become too dependent. And of course at the moment, because lots of students are writing online and typing, some students are getting used to some of the tools that are available. And I think it's worth talking to your students about that, because of course during the exam they won't be able to use any spell checkers or grammar checkers. So they, you know, using Write and Improve, and they can use it under time conditions too, then they can also practice what writing without using a dictionary, which I think would be, you know, useful for everybody. Yeah.
Lovely.
Do you agree?
Pardon?
Do you agree?
Yes, I know. I completely agree. Victoria?
Yeah, I agree as well. I think dictionaries and online dictionaries now are great, are a great learning tool. It is true that then, of course, if you are going to face an exam situation, you also need to prepare for that.
Ellen has asked a question about whether it's better to progress through the exams at different age levels. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
What like a sort of fixed
yes,
age?
each exam, you know, at a particular age.
Yeah, I think it all very much depends on you know, on your students. We get asked a lot about A2 flyers. Should they do A2 flyers? Should they do A2 key for schools? And there are differences between the exams. I always tell teachers whatever the students feel more comfortable with. You know, I say we say, what do we say for flyers? There's no strict boundaries for flyers, but I think we say sort of 10 to 12, don't we? Or 9 to 12 for flyers. But some 12-year-olds, you know, might find young learners, you know, a little childish. I would say whatever is more comfortable for
Yeah,
them.
whatever they feel more comfortable with. In the end, we try to make the exam experience as positive as possible, and it is a matter of the students trying the material, the sample papers, and deciding.
Exactly. And I mean, I don't necessarily think there's a rush. I mean, we have for schools up to B2 first for schools. There's no difference between B2 first and first for schools in terms of the level. The input and the content that we use is more appropriate to sort of teenagers and school students, but yeah, it's another myth that in Spain particularly, starters are much easier to get for schools, but there's no difference in terms of the language that we're focusing on, etc. Again, it depends very much on the maturity of your students. I mean, I remember being given or teaching this 13-year-old girl who was almost native, and preparing her for proficiency, and it was disastrous because the tasks, what she was being asked to do, she was nowhere near mature enough for that. So again, I think you've got to make that judgment with the maturity of your students.
Thank you very much. And can I invite you both to put your camera on as we come to the close?
Yes.
There is one question I just saw there, which is, can you go from A2 flyers to B1 preliminary directly?
Definitely,
question.
I would say that, yeah.
Some students do, some students don't.
Yeah.
Again, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, A2 key, it measures a bit into B1.
Mm-hmm.
Full marks on flyers is the top of A2. But if you got full marks or did, exceptionally well on key, you will be into B1. So it's a slightly broader testing range, but I see no problem with going from A2 flyers straight to B1 preliminary.
Well, I'd like to thank you both and just say that there's lots of positive feedback in the chat, and it's been very informative and useful, and people have said it's quite challenging to do assessment of writing, so they've found this session particularly useful, and a big thank you. So
Excellent.
Thank you to you both. Well,
thank you for having us.
And thank you to everyone for joining us for this session. We look forward to seeing you again.